Hi there, I'm Charlotte Smead. Welcome to another episode of Autism Sparks, brought to you on behalf of Autism Dogs. We are missing the lovely Emma on this episode, but look forward to having her back for the next pod. Right, I think we're going to need to buckle up for today's episode because it's a bit of a doozy. Today we're going to be looking at a particularly thorny issue, education. Joining me in the studio, we have Anna, Adele, Craig and Laura, who each have some valuable experience to share in terms of their journey through the education system.
What was true, they were shouting at her because she needed more instructions to do some tasks.
The percentage of people that just need a little bit of a different approach to learning that will then thrive.
Be able to go into the world of work, to be able to access healthcare, all of those things that, like I said, we just take for granted. And actually, I'm fortunate enough to work in a setting that's a huge focus.
Our kids come out of education having achieved their best selves.
Anna is from Scotland, mum to a daughter who is 16 years old. Her daughter was diagnosed when she was 14 years old and missed 2 years of education in high school. Adele is a mum to 3 neurodiverse boys. All 3 boys started life in mainstream primary schools, with the eldest moving to a specialist school first in year 6, middle in year 7, and youngest year 4. All boys have had EHCPs. All 3 of her children have had different issues with different schools, resulting in school refusals, medical sign-offs, and changes of schools. Between her children, Adele has attended over 30 EHCP review meetings and taken a local authority to tribunal in one. Adele also ran a charity in Manchester, supporting over 150 families with neurodiverse family members. We also have Craig here. Craig is a parent of 2 daughters. His eldest is 22 and just started university, and has just last month been diagnosed with ASD and ADHD. His 16-year-old daughter was diagnosed with ASD at 11. He is currently working on setting up an educational advocacy business to support others on their journey, called Advocacy. Finally, we also have Laura in the studio. Laura is a teacher who has experience of supporting autistic pupils in both mainstream and SEN education across primary and secondary settings. Thank you all for joining. So I'm going to start with some statistics that I find absolutely shocking, though I think for everyone here that may not come as much of a surprise. So research shows us that more than a quarter of autistic children are persistently absent from school in England. This is around 51,000 children. This has a huge impact on the paths open to autistic adults, and a government report suggests that just 15% of autistic adults are in full-time employment, and only 9% in part-time employment. As of January 2024, 176,000 children and young people in England have an education, health and care plan. This is nowhere near enough, as there are over 1.6 million pupils in England who have special educational needs. Things do not fare any better over in Scotland. In fact, the picture is more bleak. You cannot get an EHCP in Scotland, but rather a Coordinated Support Plan, a CSP. There are thought to be around 260,000 children in Scotland who have additional support needs, and yet there was a paltry 1,318 children with a CSP in 2023. I can clearly remember the exact moment I realised that the education system was broken. The moment I felt completely failed by the education system. Several years ago, I had put a formal complaint into our council, which would be a local authority down in England, as, amongst other things, one of my daughters was getting no education provision while out of school. I had read the law surrounding this and felt sure of what her rights were. I was burning with an anger I felt was justified. After 3 weeks, I was told that no part of my complaint had been upheld, that the school had provided a special desk for her, even though she wasn't in school. Professionals gave up time to attend meetings to discuss her, and that this constituted a full and fair education. In fact, they hinted in their response that maybe mum and dad were not coping and needed support. There was no mention in their response about a need for any education provision. It was a very low point for us, and I felt anger and frustration at an incredibly deep level. When you have points in your life like this, there are two paths left to you. I could have increased in my bitterness and anger towards the system, spent years fighting for provision I was just never going to get, or I could make sure that the education system never had the chance to let down my children again. I took the second option. By 13, my eldest Elodie was completely out of education after a prolonged period of struggling and having a reduced timetable. She had severe contamination anxiety, and this was hugely triggered by school. By the time she could no longer attend, she was so ill she could not touch any paper that had anything to do with education. She could not type or write anything to do with education, and I didn't know what to do. I started to go into her room every day and chat to her about one subject. I would sit far away from her, and I would never ask her to touch anything. I graduated to a whiteboard and taught her verbally for about 18 months, till she felt able to write on her computer. In the tiniest of steps, we brought her back to education. And this year she finished school and completed her exams, being taught at home. She now has choices as to what she can do. My middle daughter Molly has a lot of complex health issues. With that and anxiety, she has also not been in school for several years and has probably never had full attendance at school. Molly has cerebral visual impairment, a visual impairment where her eyes see fine but her brain can't process the visual information. This impacted how she was viewed in school and her education trajectory. My husband and I knew that she had an amazing brain that needed unlocked. So we embarked on a journey of understanding how her brain worked and teaching her in ways that worked for her, however unconventionally. We brought the school along with us, though Molly doesn't attend physically. And though she is highly complex, she is now in her exam years, getting ready to sit the equivalent of GCSEs next year. I'm not a specialist in any of the children's subjects. I spend most of my time learning information minutes before they do. I live with the constant anxiety I'm not teaching them the correct things and always feel a step behind where I should be. However, it will always remain the biggest privilege of my life to walk with them on their education journey. Molly is one of the 1,318 with a CSP. I'm glad it's there, but I do not think it protects her educational rights. I have read Scottish law and the expectations set out for absent pupils, and it is so far away from anything I have ever experienced. And there I'm going to stop because I could literally talk about this all night. But I'd like to first of all just set out my stall and say this. I used to be so embarrassed I could not get my children to school, like I was an absolute failure. I was told that I needed to tell my children school is school. Other parents made comments that were difficult for me to hear, and I wondered how they got it right and I got it so wrong. But I have moved so far away from that place. Now I know deep in my bones that education is for every single child, but the school building is not. That it isn't the educator's fault, nor the parents', and it's most definitely not the child's. We need to change our system. And I also want to say that I've met and interacted with many, many amazing educators. They are kind and caring and want to support. It is the system, not the people, who are broken. Okay, got that all off my chest. So I'm now going to come to you guys. So Anna, if I could come to you first, can you share a bit about your experience in terms of autism and education?
This is the point I said from Scotland because, as you, Charlotte, you know, our system is a bit different to English one, and I wasn't aware of this at all. I am not from Scotland. I am not from England. I am from Poland. So I have experience with totally different education system. So once we applied for our dog, and we were so excited listening to others about their experience, and children are taking a dog to school, and we were excited about this. And one of the reasons we applied for this dog, it was like taking back my daughter to school. And what we find out, we are not allowed to take a dog to school. So yes, we were in touch, yes, Charlotte, and you helped me a lot, Caroline as well, and we finally managed to speak to council, like local authority, yes, in England. You mentioned, I didn't know about this, but how it started. So, well, at the end of primary 7, Julia started to be very, very anxious about school. She didn't want to go to school, complaining on her sore tummy, and I wasn't well as well at this time, and I thought it was affected because of me being not well. I was at hospital twice as well, and so I thought maybe this is the point why she feels so unwell about thinking to go to school. Okay, so everything was fine. I came back to better health and started high school, and all this nightmare started as well. So it was getting worse and worse. And when we were going to GPs talking about the situation, they were saying, oh, because of hormones, oh, because one child is settling down faster, another one not. Okay, so we were waiting. I was all the time in touch with school, and cut a long story short, COVID appeared. So my daughter was happy about being out of school, about this home education, and then she felt overwhelmed. It was too much for her. She couldn't cope with classwork and anything else. When they were gradually coming back to school, she just couldn't stop her education at S3. She didn't go at all. She didn't go in S4. We were trying everything. I was on different forums online, and I was getting the advice from other parents whose children were struggling to go to school. So we were giving her hours. If you go to school, we will give you this, or we will buy you this. And it worked at the beginning for very short period, and it stopped. I don't want this. I just would like. I cannot go to school. I hate you. Just don't force me to go to school. So she was trying it as for to go to school, but it was really, really hard for her. And to be honest, yes, 2 years of education was what I would like to add. So everything started when I was 11, and I knew it's something more than doctors were saying about the hormones, about settling down, and I knew it is something more. It came to the point I make another call to the doctor. And finally, I managed to speak to someone who started to listen to me and took my case very seriously. 2 days later, we got a letter from CAMS, like emergency appointment. My daughter didn't like it. One day I got a call from the person who was talking to Julia, to my daughter, started this autism assessment, and it was a shock for me because before she asked me so many questions about my daughter. And then and everything my replies were no. Like, for example, when she started to walk, when she started potty training, when she started to talk, and everything was against of this assessment. So I thought it must be mistake. It's not autism. It's depression. I don't know. It is something else. Once the assessment went through, heard she is autistic. First, we felt relief, and I feel till now I feel relief because I know why my daughter was struggling. But after about 2 weeks, she stopped talking to people. She didn't get up from bed. Everything started during the COVID. It was really, really hard for all of us. But I was in contact with the pediatric teacher, and they were really, really helpful. But we couldn't still find the right plan for my daughter. We were trying really a lot, and she was going to school, for example, for 1 hour, just only to talk to someone and come back, and just going closer to the building. It was for her like, my goodness, so stressful, but school was really, really supportive. Once the head teacher changed, I decided I will try again, and I sent the email to head teacher, and we started to talk. And this is when everything started to make sense. And I really regret waiting so long to speak to this person. And what I'm now, few people, few moms from Scotland, from the place I live, They have very similar situation to mine. Their children are not diagnosed like officially yet. Everything is in progress, and I am advising them every time, please don't wait, go and speak to her teacher straight away. I don't know if will work for others. We were trying to organize like a homeschooling. I was reading a lot about this, but she was refusing. She couldn't. She said, I just can't. It's too much for me. And I don't know what else to add. Last year, finally, everything was organized for my daughter and her dog to be allowed officially, and legally, to go to school, to the class. She was allowed before, but only out of hours. During her exam, for example, she could go and sit in the separate class, but so everything started. Her plan was to come back to school this year full time. And you don't believe me, she did it. Is full time S6 who's thinking about going to university. We went to open day last Saturday to Edinburgh, and we are going at the end of the month to Stirling to see the place. And I cannot be more happy and so proud. Education system is broken. I have to just plan because it's quite a lot going on. I will tell you something my daughter shared with me about primary school. Her nightmare started in a primary school. I didn't know anything about a teacher shouting at her. I didn't know at all. I am quite honest person, and every time when I was going to primary school to talk to teachers during the parents meeting, every time I was asking, okay, for example, all fine. My daughter is brilliant, is helpful, and clever, but it must be something else. She cannot be perfect. And please tell me if maybe there is some areas I can help her. And every time it was, no, Mrs. Spice, everything is fine. We wish more children to be in our class. And what was true, they were shouting at her because she needed more instructions to do some tasks. And she kept asking because my daughter she likes to be perfect in everything. So if she didn't understand something, she's asking obviously. And this is what she was scared to go to school in high school as well. And she is still now. She says if she would, and she's meeting people, she goes somewhere. She says, "Mom, what if I'm so scared? What if they will shout at me?" And you know what? It's not fair. When I'm talking to someone, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, it sounds like someone autistic. You know what? This knowledge in your head, even though you are not saying this loudly, even though it's even quieter than your thoughts, teachers who have this experience with other children, they should talk to their parents more honestly, especially when someone asks, can you tell me something like maybe some negatives about my child? And this is for me, I am not judging anybody, but it's like a click. You know what? It is something. She is asking too many questions, or stuff like this. So I don't know. It would be for me click. Okay, maybe let's look at this deeper. And what my daughter says, Mom, if I would be diagnosed with autism in primary school, it would be so easier for me to go through all this transition to high school and everything else, even taking part in after school clubs. She was really good in gymnastics, but she couldn't go because it was too much for her. And we could manage after we knew what's going on and why. If we would stop this area, I think it should start everything in primary school or even better in nursery. Teacher should be more educated because it's so frustrating. My daughter lost 2 years of her education, 2 years of her life because she didn't have any friends. She didn't have life. She didn't go outside for weeks, being in her pajama for weeks, didn't wash, all this stuff. It's really sad if I didn't say something what shouldn't be said.
No, not at all, Anna. That was really amazing. I think it's so wonderful to hear that your daughter is in a place where she is thriving, it sounds like, at the moment, and that's just wonderful. And I think the other thing that's just amazing to hear is the support that you're getting, because I don't believe that that's universal, and so it's really great that you feel well supported by the school, and that it sounds to me like the school took a really healthy approach in just supporting your daughter to kind of feel more comfortable returning to education. And I think it's a really important point that home education does not work for every child. The home is their safe space, and education can be so overwhelming that you're mixing a safe space with something that's quite stressful. And I think as well, definitely both my daughters had a kind of a home hospital teacher who would come to the house for an hour a week, and they really struggled because they struggled to speak to people outside of the house. So it's really important to know that every child's journey is quite different, and what works for one child will not, may not work for another. Maybe actually another child's absolute nightmare. So yeah, I think that was a really good point. But it's just so wonderful to hear about how your daughter is getting on at the moment. And Craig, if we come to you next, what about you? Chat to us about your journey in terms of autism and education.
Yeah, well, I didn't realise that the system in Scotland was so much tougher than it is in England. So a testament to both of you to get where you have, and really fantastic to see what's happening there as well, and for your daughter. I mean, I've made some notes there as I was listening through, and you said they are all very different end of the needs that we hear, and that's where it comes into that spectrum of what we're dealing with here. That we need to find that kind of, I suppose, varied approach, a sensible approach to how we can deal with this. Not every child's needs are going to be the same, and the schools need to be more fluid in how they adapt to deal with those difficulties, because their difficulties today might not be their difficulties next year. Once you sorted those out, there'll be something else as we scratch through it. But yeah, I think as from the intro there, in hindsight, I think we should have applied for the EHCP for my daughter a long time before. But she did have some other medical needs that were not autism, that kind of, I suppose, masked it for so many years. It kind of was a reason, wasn't comfortable with clothing, was fatigued, was tired, all these different things were all covered. Food, difficulties with food, all those different issues that you now go, it's autism, it's so obviously autism. On top of the fact she's got pancreatic insufficiency as well. So, the pancreatic insufficiency masked a lot of things until she was almost a teenager. And it kind of came to a head as with school refusal. But where we are is a 3-tier system. So as she went into middle school, the transitions just became too much. She had some educational support previously to that. The school was getting some form of budget, but there was interventions that were happening that we weren't aware of, that they hadn't spoken to us about. And then when it was coming to a head and the school refusal scenario starts coming into play, and the meltdowns after school, and being told she's fine when she's here and she's really engaging and bubbly, which she is, but the meltdowns at home afterwards, the struggle to get into school, all those things. And they say, get her to school and she's fine when she's here. But the struggle to get into school and the struggle when she came out just didn't make the being in school worthwhile. And then that bit, like everyone else has said there, the blame game of, and then you're internalizing it and thinking, is it because of something that we're doing? Are we being too soft? Do you just need to get up and go to school? And all those things that don't really hold any weight when you've got a condition like that to deal with. Mm-hmm. But I think it's kind of a similar story that I've seen with other friends and family as well, where the school will say, no, she won't get an EHCP. They said that they'd seen other children who had much more evidence and much more significant need than my daughter had, and they were refused the EHCPs. Just how misinformed or reluctant they were to support in that respect. And it just felt like, I mean, you're going to these people and you're taking them on face value as being the people who know what they're talking about. You're dealing with a Senko. And again, I see it time and time again with Senkos. It's not all, granted, but, you do see it where they're not necessarily fully aware of all of what's available in the local area themselves, for whatever reason, or it just feels like they've been told to avoid going down the EHCP route almost. And that's where we felt there was almost a reluctance to go down that route and to put the support in place. But ultimately, we did go down that route. We were quite lucky. I suppose one of the key statements that we had, there was one of the local authority funded educational psychologists came to the house. And at this point, my daughter hadn't been diagnosed with autism. So we hadn't even considered it as being the reasons why. So we were still trying to figure all that out. And he said that she would be unlikely to return to mainstream education in the near future. At that sentence there, that quotation, that was the bit that when I was looking through all of the documents, everything that I've dealt with since, it was that sentence there. That was the thing, that phrase that educational psychologist said is what pinned us getting so much of the support that was required from that point on. The power of just that phrase that he had said in his report, I don't think he's not an educational psychologist anymore, but I don't think he realised the benefit that's had for us as a family and for my daughter. Again, going through all of that, going through all the process, then we're applying for an EHCP. We're using that educational psychologist's report and the local authority trying to dismiss that as if it was a paid for report. But it was a paid for report. It was paid for from the budget from one of their schools. And under the NICE guidelines, they have to hold it in the same way as any other educational psychologist report. So I latched onto that, as you can imagine, and I used that quite a lot throughout the years to get the support that we needed. And we managed, well, there's a long process in it all. We had a MET referral, which was just a nonsense. CAMS were involved as well, which were very supportive, actually. It was before, I suppose, CAMS have been overwhelmed like they have been. It was CAMS who put us on the umbrella pathway, as it is, to find out about the autism diagnosis, which was like a light bulb moment, I suppose, for us as a family to realise that. But through all that process, getting the first EHCP through, and I've been referred to the group manager for the local authority, who essentially again blamed us as parents, got social services involved, who very quickly said, don't know what you're talking about. They're doing a great job here and don't be wasting our time. I then brought the local authority to a tribunal through the local government ombudsman to a stage 4 complaint, and that was upheld. So all this while you're trying to deal with having a child who's got a lot of difficulties and you're trying to educate them at home and do all of that. But I just felt that I couldn't be a silent voice in all of it. I think that was my way of applying myself and figuring it out, and then understanding the law element of it, the legalities of it. I made some mistakes to begin with, I think, in my approach to it. And it's those mistakes that I now realise what they were for when I'm helping some of other friends and families to, from that very start, them foundations to get the support that kids need. And the system's broken, I think, as we said at the start there, Charlotte, if the system is broken, they will blame the parents. I think, why? Because it's the easy option. They'll always try and turn it around on mum, usually, is what they try and do. Well, they weren't going to turn it around on me. I wasn't going to have it. So, everything I did, I documented it back on email. I recorded all of our conversations, and not physically, but actually in notes, and then replied back and kept records of everything in order to do that. We shouldn't have to. That's the point, is that you've got enough on your plate. You're trying to run a family. You're trying to go to work. You're trying to deal with a child who's got additional needs. They've got siblings who now we know as well. Well, we knew then, but we know for certain now also had additional needs. There's a lot that you're trying to deal with, and to go through all of that. We got the educational at school approved, got a personal budget approved, went through a number of EHCP reviews. And it was my wife who managed to get her back to a position that she was going to be able to attend school again. And it just so happened there was a new provisional open up in the area. It wasn't cheap. And they had a therapy dog, and that we could see during the home education element of it, that our own dogs at home, how much of a positive benefit they'd had for her. So it didn't look like a school. There was nothing schooly about it. Bearing in mind, she only up until very recently couldn't even drive past the school I couldn't look at the school as we drive past it, which is only around the corner. So yeah, it didn't look like a school, and we went for a taster session with her. She loved it. And then we went through the whole next fight of getting a special provision onto the HCP. And they named a lot of very, very inadequate, inappropriate schools in the area that there's absolutely no chance that that she would have attended. They all agreed that they would take her on board as a student, even though they hadn't even read her EHCP or her most recent EHCP. So they were saying they could meet need based on that, but they hadn't read it. So I engaged with them, took them out. For my eldest daughter, one of the schools we went to, she would have thrived there. That would have been absolutely the perfect environment for her. But for our youngest, it was never going to work. It was a school, it was uniforms, it was bright lights, it was busy, there was, a lot of students. The school she goes to now, I think, it's only got 18 pupils in there. So it's a very, very different setting. So I managed to, I got that school to say that they wouldn't have been able to meet needs, which then enabled us to get her to go where she is now. And she's done GCSEs, she's done functional skills in English, she's done a dog grooming, she's done a animal care course, and is currently doing dog grooming, and is engaging in education. And, and the same thing I see for a lot of friends and families and obviously my own kids, is they've all got a thirst for knowledge. They just need the right environment. Everybody wants to learn. We all want to learn constantly. This is the reason why I've done so much research into it myself. And every day is a school day, but we just need to get the right environment for them and find out how it is that they learn, because not everybody learns the same. It's a neurodiverse world that we live in its own right. And I just think from an educational perspective, it's the schools that need to figure out how they need to engage with these children. They need to identify it. There's a lot that can be learned, but they don't seem to be learning it.
The fight that you've had, Craig, the documenting everything, the getting up when you're told no and going, okay, I'm coming back at this, I'm going to email, I'm going to document, I'm going to do all of this. It must have been exhausting, but also I wonder, and I'm only saying this because you kind of talked about being referred to social work. So my husband and I, there was a professionals meeting about our kids, and they asked us to attend family therapy. And I remember feeling quite upset, to be honest with you. I felt like powerless, actually, like other people could make decisions about our lives and our parenting, and I felt really powerless. And yet it was actually an amazing experience, because we went along to the family therapy and she spoke to us, and she wrote a letter that went around all the professionals who'd asked us to attend, and it said, Mum and Dad need to be kinder to themselves, and professionals need to let them make boundaries and respect those boundaries. And I remember thinking, this letter is like gold dust. Like, I want to frame it. Like, I want every parent who has that horrible feeling, because I think professionals aren't aware of how much power they have, and how intimidating it can be when you're in meetings where you've got several professionals all saying the same thing, and you're being like, I don't know how to speak against this, and how to speak against this in a way that you're going to not think that mum's not coping, or mum's being a bit over dramatic or a bit emotional about this. And it can feel really difficult. And I suppose what you were just talking about just brought those memories back, but also you said it really well. You are already dealing with an intense home situation. Things are already tricky at home. I remember once working with Elodie all day to get into school, and I got into school at 3:15. School finished at 3:30, and I thought, who's winning here? Who's getting the benefits? And I just think that it's so difficult when you're feeling that intensity. If any professional starts questioning you as a parent, it can be so difficult. Being referred to social work, being referred to family therapy, you can think, okay, all you're doing is reinforcing this guilt that I've got already, that it's me, that it's on me. And I think that I'm imagining that a huge amount of people who would listen to this would kind of understand that feeling. And if nothing else, please take that it's not you, I think, is what I would want to emphasize.
No, it's not you.
Not you.
You do you do it for your kids, because you know what your child is like. You know what's good for your child. And you know deep down if your child's swinging the lead and just doesn't want to go in. My daughter was refusing to take her medication so she could be physically ill, so she didn't go to school. She was self-harming herself at only 11 years of age. That's when you do look at it and go, this isn't worth it. And we did look at it and go, this isn't worth it. And we're not going to be the ones that are going to be accused of. But she was actually, we were told by one of the healthcare workers who came, or one of the professionals, I think it was somebody from the Met actually, who were actually a private company, nothing to do with any local authority or healthcare. And they accuse parents of being snowflakes. We're raising snowflakes. This is a generation of snowflakes we're raising. And it's just, there's comments like that, which again, I did use that very, very strongly in many, many emails to gain afterwards. I wasn't there for that meeting, and I think it's different for me. I was at work most of the time. I wasn't dealing with the meltdowns on a day-to-day basis. I did see the outcomes of it. I did see the aftermath of it. But as that heightened awareness of it all, I was in a position to be able to maybe, not that I didn't become emotional about it, but be able to strip emotion out of it a little bit and take it in a more logical, pragmatic, almost business kind of sense towards it, and look at this as a kind of from a different perspective. But you're dealing with, again, we're talking about kids who have got, significant need, and you've got most likely parents who've probably gone undiagnosed themselves that don't have, the ability to even go down that route themselves because they're consumed so much by looking after their kids. And there's a lot of reasons why some of these children and some of our children we might not have realized that our children were autistic for a long time because of accommodations that we made, because of family and friends that we've got around us. It is very much, it's genetic. I just think that the whole system just tries to bully people into taking your kid off roll, and then you haven't got to worry about it anymore because you've chosen, because that's what they're trying to do, make you electively home educate. We wouldn't have it. Absolutely. We made them keep us on roll the whole time.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is, okay, this is cynical view coming out here, but as soon as the government admit that there's a problem with the system, that it's not the parents, that it's not the children, well, that's when you need to do something about it. And nobody has any money to do anything about it. So it's actually easier to go, well, other people can get their kids into school, so why can't you? And ignore the fact that huge swathes of autistic individuals are struggling to be in school. And I just think that, this is very cynical, but I just wonder if as soon as you say, yeah, there's a problem with our system, you have to sort the problem with your system. So it's easier to go, no, it's not the system.
But how much money is it costing us as a society by not sorting the problem out in the long term? You've got, if we're saying that if the percentage of neurodivergent individuals, not just autism, but ADHD and associated conditions, the percentage of people that just need that little bit of a different approach to learning, that will then thrive and will then become massive contributors to society in the future. And if we invest in them now, then the future that they're going to provide back, it'll come back in swathes. It's just short-sighted. It's that 4-year government approach that we've got on things, and it's just not good enough. And it needs to be taken off the government, and it needs to be done as a separate entity rather than a 4-year cycle of budgets and local authorities in a similar scenario. It's just because it doesn't work, because you just then go around in circles and people keep on failing. Special measures. How many local authorities are in special measures because of education? Well, I know from where we are that it's changed from being private to semi-private to local council to back to being semi-private again. It's just, you're just passing the problem around and blaming people who aren't. And these people who are in the semi-private institution, the actual companies, have now got jobs in the council. And then it's a circle, and it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't work.
Well, Laura, I'm going to come to you, but I'm aware you're in the system that we keep saying is broken. Absolutely. What is your experience from inside?
And I agree with so much of what you've all said. Absolutely. And I do kind of sit here. I'm very fortunate to work in a wonderful school, and it's an SEN setting with children that do thrive. That absolutely thrive, and it's a big school. It's about 240 pupils, so it's not small, and it goes from reception right through to sixth form, and on beyond that to supported internships. So particularly with what Craig was saying about kind of that beyond school, beyond education, that is what we're thinking about all the time. It's thinking about what is going to be the best possible outcome for these pupils. So it is work experience. It is getting them into jobs that they are able to fulfill, that they're able to do a wonderful job at, to be able to have that best possible life, to be able to access the community, things that we just absolutely take for granted. And it's not just about and as a teacher, I probably shouldn't say this, but it's not just about the English and the maths and the science and that curriculum. It's about that wider world. It's about being able to be independent and have those skills to live without having to kind of stay with your parents if that's not your path, or be able to go into the world of work, to be able to access healthcare, all of those things that, yeah, like I said, we just take for granted. And actually, I'm fortunate enough to work in a setting that's a huge focus. That's absolutely what we want for our young people. And it came from a mainstream background. So I was a primary teacher in a mainstream school with a third of the class needing additional support, with at some point during the time that I had them being diagnosed with autism, ADHD, all different kind of conditions. And I know from then how long it's taken them to actually get the support that they needed. And I'm not on the same level as any of you, and I don't profess to have that fight. But as a teacher, me having to have that internal fight to go, they need support. They need support. We need something there for them. And, you know, from going to secondary school, a massive jump. And you see that so often, even if at primary school, you know, it's one class, one teacher, the same 29 other children in the class. To go to a high school where you have to organise your day and arrive at 5 different classes, and that's for a neurotypical pupil, that's a big shock to the system. Ask an autistic young person to do that. How?
Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah.
how is that going to happen? It's not, and I do, yeah, and I do absolutely see it from the other side. Now I can only sympathise with the fight you've had to have, because it shouldn't be there. Absolutely shouldn't.
Sorry, Jim, I can ask you a question there. Just so you see that element of that gets said that they're fine when they're in school.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty, isn't it, I suppose, for some teachers, that they don't necessarily realise what goes on outside of that.
No.
And I'm not saying, like, I've seen, we've had some great teachers over the years, and it was actually because of the school that we ended up getting down the route that we did do, actually, in a roundabout of a way. But it's not all. But I think some just feel like you can almost institutionalized, like there's no point because they're not going to get the support that they need, and there's no point in trying. I haven't got the resources. It's that element that I just don't tie in with.
No, and absolutely there is. It's masking, you know. A lot of the time what teachers are seeing are absolutely just not seeing it in schools, and that's the reason why. But I think fundamentally there is a lack of training for teachers. Having gone through a primary education degree myself, and I've had this conversation with the university I attended, and they wholeheartedly agree, that my feedback to them was, as a trainee teacher, there was not enough emphasis on how to meet the needs of pupils with SEN. It just wasn't there, and not I'm not coming out in defence of all teachers, because I think it's a lottery. I think there are, absolutely wonderful teachers out there and doing their job under very difficult circumstances with their hands tied a lot of the time. But there just is a lack of experience of how to spot what's going on, how to. Teachers aren't there to diagnose autism, but to actually be able to realise that something is not right, here, and we're not meeting need. But there are so many simple things that any mainstream classroom can do to meet need. Simple things that cost nothing. Visual timelines, giving breaks, meeting sensory needs. They're absolutely tiny, tiny elements and don't cost a fortune. But if the training isn't there for somebody to be able to think and go, right, I know what needs to happen here, I know how to make this provision better, then they're kind of, who do I go to? Who do I ask? Because trying to get somebody to come into school to come and to support teacher with a pupil that they're not really sure where to go with is hugely difficult. I mean, and the SEN school I'm at, we actually have an outreach program where we support our local primary and secondary schools. So we're doing it as a school. We're going out and supporting other schools, because where else do they go? Because we're kind of doing it day in, day out, and we obviously over 240 pupils who are all different, who all have different needs. If you're in a classroom as a mainstream teacher and you haven't kind of met that need before, and you go, okay, where do I go? And so it's kind of fallen to us to help support and advise other teachers in that way. But if you don't know where to go, And parents are having to become the experts, and that shouldn't be the case. That absolutely shouldn't be the case. It should be the professionals there going, right, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to help you. This is how we're going to support you. Not parents having to come and go, this is what you need to do to meet my child's needs.
Yeah.
I hope. But
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's like living the dream, though. There, Laura. I think, I've definitely been in a meeting where it's been like, well, I've done a course on autism, so I know what I'm talking about. Well, I'm not sure that you can just come straight in and comment on our situation right now. It's tricky. Del, I'm so sorry. I knew that as soon as we all started talking about education, it's just one of those topics, isn't it? I certainly could talk all night. So I'm sorry that it's taken a wee while to get to you, but please come in, share your experience.
Well, before I talk about my kids, can I just say, listening to what Laura was saying, being a bit maybe blunt on this subject, having had very different roles, which you'll hear about with my three sons, can I just be a bit mean about the education system, which you'll understand maybe in context in a second? I think that first of all, there are some phenomenal teachers out there that do absolutely naturally understand our kids, and there is no teaching in the world that will teach this to teachers. Some teachers just naturally understand our kids. They have all the time in the world for it. They listen to you. They will understand. They will take all the time in the world, and they naturally understand and listen. You say that my child has come home, they've had a meltdown today, and they will say to you, don't know, nothing's happened at school, but I hear you, I understand. Don't know what's happened, but let's see what's happened tomorrow. Let me help you, let me support you. And then there are those teachers that go, not my problem, nothing happened at school today, don't care. And it doesn't matter what training both those teachers have had, and nothing in the world is going to change that. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter what training both those teachers have had, there is nothing that any of us can do about that. There are always going to be those two types of teacher. I'm sorry, Laura, but there are always going to be those two types. It doesn't matter what we do. There are always going to be two types of teacher. There are going to be those teachers that naturally care about the kids in front of them, and that can be whether they've got neurodiversities or they don't, that are going to naturally care about the kids in front of them, and that's going to happen whatever kids they have in front of them. And if you're lucky enough to have a teacher in front of you that cares about your kids, then your kid is going to succeed. And I know from people that teach teachers that there is not enough training for neurodiversity. Unfortunately, our kids are at the bottom of the pile when it comes to training. There we go. Anyway, yes, my kids. I am very blessed to have three fantastic sons. All of them are neurodiverse, batterings of lots of things on top of things. All of them are ADHD and autism. All of them were diagnosed differently, just to make life interesting. My eldest went through a mainstream big primary school. He started off, he was the latest to get diagnosed with autism. He actually got his ADHD diagnosis first and then his autism diagnosis. He didn't get his EHCP through until he was 5, and in those days it was called a statement. So there was no healthcare provision, and it was a battle to get his statement. He will tell you, and he still does tell me, how terrible the primary school was to him, how awful it was, and what a nightmare it was to get his statement. Unfortunately, the not to be mentioned primary school was not very supportive towards getting his provision, kept telling us they could help us, kept telling us he wouldn't get the statement, kept telling us they would support us, and we very naively, and apologies to my eldest, who will probably still never forgive us, didn't get the support in place. We listened to the professionals. We didn't know better because he was our eldest. We listened to what they told us to do. We bribed him, a bit like you, Anna. We bribed him into school. This child must have, to this day, the largest collection of action figures known to England. Don't know about Scotland, but he definitely has the largest collection of action figures in England to get him into school. We did try school refusing, but we thought it was better to force that child into school. We then went through bringing him home for lunch because we were told that he wasn't allowed into school at lunchtime because he was the violent child, and the children that beat him up at lunchtime were not in the wrong. It was his fault. So I picked him up every day at lunchtime and took him back in the afternoons. You can imagine the picture. Eventually his statement did arrive. It didn't do him any good. So we moved him to a much smaller primary school, which were amazing. It was the best thing we ever did. And we then moved our middle child to the same primary school. They both thrived. It was the best decision we made. Absolutely phenomenal. I mean, tiny classes. Our youngest then got moved out of nursery again. Poor little child got battered around into a tiny nursery school. All the children thrived. At which point EHCPs have become a thing. Those people that haven't followed, they then added the healthcare provision in England. So what used to be an education only provision in the UK, England decided to add the education healthcare plan. So what happened was, it used to be an enforceable platform in the UK that you used to be able to only enforce the education part for your child. So what happened was, anything that needed to be done in the school in the UK was enforced by law. So what is now section F of your EHCP was enforced by law. So if you take your useful side point, if you take your local authority to tribunal, you can only enforce section F, which is your legal part of your tribunal. So for those people that have an autism assistance dog and you want them in tribunal, make sure that you put your dog under section F. If you do not put your assistance dog under section F, your dog is not enforceable under law to be part of your child's care plan at school. If you put them under any other section, your dog cannot be enforced by tribunal, and the school have no right to have them in school. Just a little sidebar for you. So all the kids, there you go, I'll get back to that for you. So all the kids moved across, the healthcare plans were put in place. Our eldest then went to a specialist provision. That's, there you go. So I don't think any of yours are any of yours in specialist provisions?
Yeah.
There you go. So we took the big step, got lots of funny looks of, why are you doing this? You'll never achieve anything in life. Why would you do that? They won't get anywhere. But we decided that mainstream was not the way to go. It was too big, it was too much, it was too noisy. To us, it was too much. It wasn't going to achieve anything. It was the best decision we ever made for him. He mixed with people that were the same as him. He mixed with people he could have conversations with. It still sticks in my mind that one of his first days in school, he came home and I said, "How did you talk to a friend? What did you say?" I said, "Hello." And what did this person said? He said, "Hello." He asked me if I like Pokemon. And you said, I said no. And then what did you say? That was the end of the conversation. And I thought, was our conversation? He said, no, it was great. That was all we talked about. And he was over the moon, delighted, because in his mind, it was fabulous. He didn't have to engage. This person asked him a question. He answered the question. That was great, because that's all he wanted to talk about. He didn't have to answer, and he was delighted. And he made friends. He was happy. They did social skills. They did working for life. Is it working for life they call it at school? Preparation for working life. It was fantastic. The school was amazing. He did really well then. He came out with 9 GCSEs. He went on to do BTEC level 3. He did what they call dual enrollment for sixth form. So he went to a sixth form college and he stayed enrolled with them for the sixth form. So when he wasn't in the sixth form, he went there and they supported him in the sixth form and they supported him in their sixth form. Does that make sense? So he was never with lots of free time, and he got triple distinction star. So he got the top grades at BTEC, and then he went to university where he graduated with a 2-1 and is now doing an independent film and is now doing some work for himself. So this is just to prove to you that with the right education and support, they can go far. And to make you even more happy, my middle son did very well in his primary school, was diagnosed incredibly late. We always knew he was autistic and ADHD, and nobody would believe us. Several complaints to CAMHS, formal complaints to CAMHS. He did so well in his primary school and so well supported in this primary school that he couldn't get any HCP because, as you all know, you have to prove a need for any HCP. And he was doing so well in the primary school that they couldn't prove a need for the EHCP. So as anybody in England will testament to, you have to fail before you can get an EHCP. And Craig is nodding away.
Yeah.
So my poor child had to, even though we all knew he was going to fail and we couldn't get him to anywhere, I had to take him to this massive, big high school. We went along with the Senko from the primary school and we said he needs support. He's going to need additional support or he's going to fail. Why does he need support? He's doing really well. And she said, I'm telling you, this child needs additional support. You're going to have to put in what's called an APDR, which is the original assessment criteria of additional support, and you're going to need to literally within the first couple of weeks assess it. He's going to fail and then put in for an EHCP. No, don't need it. On paper, he's fine. Within 6 weeks, my child was physically beaten up twice, to the point he was bleeding and beaten. He was signed off sick by CAMS, as in, don't send your child to school. He was school refusing to the point that he was self-harming. He lost about 4 kilos of weight. He was not eating, and CAMS signed him off to not go back into school. They physically said he was not to go to school. We were turning away the truancy officers and not allowing them into school in the house because they were making him ill coming into the house. CAMS wrote to school and said they were not to come to our house. We had meetings at school where I would admit, I was in tears and walked out, and I've never walked out of a meeting in tears. My husband was amazing. My husband is my rock. I should do a shout out to my amazing husband. It was the awful. The poor middle child was so poorly. He was off school for months, but I have to tell you, evidence, 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 and more evidence. We turned it around. We had him in 6 months off school. I vowed to never homeschool. Then COVID came. So hats off to you, Charlotte. Could never do it again. I don't know how you do it. We homeschooled him for 6 months, which was with a child who was then diagnosed with severe anxiety, generalized anxiety and OCD. His ADHD meds. We had CBT in the house once, if not twice a week. I watched my child disappear in front of my eyes, literally. It was horrific. But we had him a fully HCP and into a specialist school within 6 months. And then I watched him turn around. But we knew where we wanted him. And I knew if I got him into a new school, to us, we couldn't homeschool, and I knew it wasn't right for us. I knew it wasn't right for him. But once we got him into the specialist provision, I watched him change overnight. Literally started to eat, started to do, and changed into a different child. He stayed in pure specialist provision through sixth form. He also has 9 GCSEs. He got distinctions in his BTEC, and he is in his final year of university. Again, I would shout out to a lot of fighting, a lot of battles, a lot of therapy, but another one for with the right battles and the right fighting, a lot of fighting, and the right provision. So you can tell I'm a big fan of specialist provision, can't you? Our youngest, very small specialist school, the entire way, mainstream primary school until year 3. He was out, he's my baby. We spotted at 2 that he was autistic. You could 2 children later, the health visitor, I think, spotted he was autistic. I was a bit in denial because my eldest had just been diagnosed. We decided he was definitely on the spectrum. He was diagnosed at 4. ADHD followed, hypermobility, all sorts. He was diagnosed very early. He won the EHCP lottery and got a full EHCP plan in reception. And he is the poster child for early support. Exactly what you were saying, Anna, and what your daughter was saying. He had a full one-to-one support in reception. And he is the poster child for early intervention. He had one-to-one in reception, and it made the world of difference to him. And he had a fantastic primary school, but when he hit year 3, it wasn't working. And I would say this for our middle child, and I'd say it for our youngest child. When you're in the right school and you can turn around, and it took a bit of a battle with the middle one, but when we could turn around and say, especially for our youngest, it's not working, it's not right, we need to move. It's time to move, and we're in the wrong school. And I think as parents, sometimes you have to say it's not right. I need to change provision. I need to make that move. Now, when it's mainstream to specialist, it's time for that evidence gathering time. You've got to have the reports, you've got to have the OT reports, you've got to have the EdPsych reports, you've got to have the CAMS reports, you've got to have, just reports and every bit of evidence, and you've got to prove that need for specialist provision. Then you've got to have the backing of your school. You've got to prove that mainstream doesn't work. You've got to prove that multi-stimulus approach to learning. You've got to prove the multidisciplinary approach. You've got to prove that mainstream doesn't work and that just a one-to-one isn't enough. But if you can get the school to back you and you've got a good school behind you, it moves. And then came the dog. He could not be medicated for his ADHD because he has some heart issues, and we found out about autism dogs, and his life changed. Wow, how our family's life changed. COVID hit, and we were one of the few people that had a delivery of a dog in the April of COVID. So she arrived literally at the gate of our house, and she got dropped at the gate. She ran down the side of our house, the gate got shut, and she arrived, and our life changed. We went from having kids who were literally masking to go in our back garden to kids that would actually leave and go out the house. However, we realised very quickly, even though we're Sprash's school, they were not doing Zooms, would you believe, during COVID. They were not in school. Yes, specialist provision, that were not in school. Can you believe that? Specialist provision 2020 who were not taking our children into school made my child with OCD's contamination anxiety far worse. We had massive transport issues, were just horrific. So you can imagine massive issues over transport, massive issues over contamination issues, brilliant for bonding issues with an assistance dog, however. But when it came to going back into school, our youngest did not want to go, because they refused to have the dog in school. Problem number one. He went back in very begrudgingly, and very, very quickly we realised that the bond had set phenomenally well, but he did not want to be in school without that dog. The school refused to have the dog. Now you'd think, and a lot of family and friends criticised us for, that we should give up arguing to take the dog into school and let it go. Not going to happen. He and the dog were symbiotic at this point, and it became very clear to us that his body language, his behaviour, his being was so much better with the dog that they needed to be as one. They needed to be. We were already in the midst of taking the local authority tribunal over the fact that his EHCP had not been amended for years anyway, and it wasn't right. That we took the decision, once we started looking at it, that we needed to move school. The school were not doing what they needed to do for various reasons. And yet again, we took the decision that if we were looking at moving anyway, and again, I'd say to anybody out there that sometimes you need to take a breath and look at the school. I think we all get stuck into, you get friendly with the school, don't you? And is it us that's wrong as a parent? I think schools make you promises, don't you, that just let's change one more thing, let's try this again, let's try it again, let's see if it works in a couple of weeks, let's give it another couple of weeks, let's try again, maybe your child will feel better, maybe you'll feel better, let's try it again. And I think sometimes it's taking a band-aid off and going, maybe the grass is greener. Maybe we actually have to take that leap of faith that actually there is something better out there for my child. There is maybe educating at home, maybe another school, maybe it is worth trying somewhere else. And there is nothing wrong with saying, actually, I am going to be brave and I am the parent. There is no other friends, there's no other parents I know at this school, but it's not about me, it's about my child, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to put them somewhere else. And we did. We found another school, and I started the conversation with, hi, my child has such and such a need. Andy has an assistance dog, and the two need to come together. Is that going to be an issue? And I thought, no, this is good. When do you want to come and have a look? I thought, wow, he's not in school currently, so when can we come? And they went together, and they welcomed the two of them open-armed, and that was it, that we never looked back. And in fact, when we went to tribunal, they'd already accepted. He'd already looked around, and the tribunal, by the time the tribunal happened, we'd fought the local authority to move him into the new school before the tribunal hit, and they'd already accepted. So it was easier to get her into the plan because we'd proved the need for her to be in the school. And I tell you what, it was the best thing we ever did, because she rocks.
That comes back to again what you said, Adele, about not being able to, having to hit rock bottom. You had to be able to not attend the school with Nimbus, and that's where you go, that's where it's wrong. You knew in your heart of hearts said that's what you're going to have to be. But why you have to hit rock bottom? What is the legality of not being allowed to let the dog? I thought a dog would have to come into the school. We've never had that issue, you see. Why does it have to be an EHCP? It's a reasonable adjustment.
There are some arguments that there are risk assessments that they can argue to, and there are risk assessments that they could argue that there are health and safety issues in school, and that there are health and safety legalities and things that they can technically argue to. I think, and I could be wrong, that because the dogs are ADI trained, and we're very, very lucky with autism dogs, that because they are ADI trained and because they are trained to such a high standard, because they are such phenomenal trainers at autism dogs, that you can prove. Now we've taken out, and I hope we can say this, we've taken out Dogs Trust Insurance because that gives you the extra liability insurance. The current school that my youngest is at did a fantastic risk assessment, and because we're looking now, and only because he's got his assistance dog are we doing this, we're now looking at a mainstream college, and there is no way we would be looking at that without her. There is no way he'd be ready for a mainstream college. There's no way I'd even contemplate looking at a mainstream college without her. And they've taken the risk assessment from his specialist school to look at, and we've been now 4 times to look at this college, and they are doing massive documents on risk assessments. When we've chatted to them, they've gone through allergy assessments, risk assessments, fire assessments, bomb assessment, they've done lift access, they've done evacuation procedures, they've done cleaning procedures, they've done religious assessments, because there are religions that dogs are problematic with. So we've gone through how that will work. And you have to take all these things into consideration. So for example, with allergies, we've gone through the fact that the course that Riley's doing, there are going to be 2 rooms for that course. So if there are any children, there are students, they're going to be 16, there will be split into 2 rooms. Anyone severely allergic will be put in a different room to my son, so that they would not be directly in contact with him. So that they would be in one room and he would be in another.
That's someone else who needs a reasonable adjustment making for them, isn't it? So who's need reasonable adjustment outweighs the other. So it's great that they're doing that, but I just think that, yeah, you're right. I just feel that they could definitely make those accommodations, and even in a normal educational setting, not just a college, but in a school. I'd not that it's a fight. You shouldn't have to. I said we had enough fighting, don't we? We haven't had that issue.
In his previous school, one of the arguments we had exactly this argument. They said that the dog couldn't come into school at all. And then they argued, this was our leaving argument, and we were only allowed to bring her into parents' evening. This was the last day we ever went into school. And this started his school refusal. And we used to bring her in to collect for appointments, for meetings at school, and for parents' evenings. And the last time he ever stepped foot on campus was for a parents' evening. And we turned up, all of us to school for parents' evening, and we were greeted by a certain teacher who will remain nameless, and they turned us away. Now, they knew that she was coming because I put it on the form. He had mentioned to his teacher that literally before leaving that the dog was coming. We had been in 2 days earlier for a meeting with her on campus, and they said that she could not come on campus. To which we said, well, we are 40 minutes from home. We're not coming. One of us could come on campus with my son for the parents' evening. One of us could sit in the car. And we said, I don't think so. The 2 of them are symbiotic at this point. Not going to happen. And they said, well, sorry, that's the rule. We said, well, no, absolutely has access rights. You've agreed to it, and you're not turning away. What would you do if it's a guide dog? No.
Yeah, same.
Right. And they said, well, we've already turned away somebody's pet dog this evening. And we said, well, they're not the same. One's a pet dog, one's an assistance dog, ADI, etc., etc. They said, well, one of our teachers is scared of dogs. And we said, well, that's not really a reason to turn the dog away. What if you put that teacher somewhere else and we'll come in? And they said, well, another one of our teachers is allergic, to which we said, well, we've literally walked this corridor 2 days ago. Can't be that allergic. And second of all, I actually have mobility issues. So I was in my wheelchair at the time, and I said, well, you don't make me get up and down. Normally, as we did at the parents' evening at the time, was I would sit in a particular room, and very kindly, all the parents, you get up and down at parents' evenings, you go up, down, move around. They very kindly would organise it. All the teachers would come to me. It's like speed dating. They would come to me. So if we're going to be in a room, if we're in a room with the dog, first of all, the teacher that's allergic, we won't see. And second of all, the teacher that's scared, we don't bring that teacher in the room. That's a reasonable adjustment. Don't really see the issue. No, wasn't having any of it. At which point our son turned around and said, I don't want to come here anymore, don't want to be here anymore, and walk. Just that was it, and refuse. That was it. Never step foot in the school again. That
You're
was
not going
it.
to feel accepted because that's your partnership. That's who you are. I get that as well. You don't want it to be a fight. You don't want them to have aggro when they go in there. They should be just accepted. But I'd strongly be trying to make them reconsider. But at that point, you're right. I know what you're saying is going like, this isn't the right environment for you. Let's go somewhere else then. Because
that was it for him. He was like, that's it. I'm not coming back. I'm done.
Yeah.
Gosh, no, that does sound like quite a journey you've had times 3, Adele. I mean, that is familiar feeling of fighting and having to pick yourself back up, document everything, get the reports that you need. It is endless and it can feel quite tiring. But I just wanted to move on a little bit. I'm aware of our time. I don't want to keep you guys too late, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what you would want to change, because I think that's really, really difficult. And actually, from listening to everyone's stories, I feel we've all got really quite different perspectives. So from my personal feeling, it's I feel that schools need to be more flexible on how you learn, where you learn, and what learning looks like. Because for some children, that is special provision school. For my kids, that wasn't, because they literally haven't been able to get out the house for several different reasons that have been due to the fact they're autistic, due to health reasons. It's been a whole compass of different things. So it wouldn't necessarily work for my kids, but in the same way that for a lot of kids, I don't home educate because I'm very much the girls are enrolled in the school. So I work with the school. They go up to the school for their exams in a separate room with a lot of accommodations. I'm allowed to sit in their exam room with them. They have a lot of provision to support them to be able to get to exams, but it's all done with the school. So it wouldn't be true to say that I homeschool. I definitely do a hybrid, but there's no support for doing hybrid. I have no idea what I'm doing. I was hearing about an interview that happened, and this mum was saying that she couldn't get her kids in school, and she was just explaining about how broken the system was, and the person said, "What would you like?" And she said, "Well, I want this system fixed, but before that, I'd like to be paid because I'm being a teacher. The government allocate money for every child, and my child isn't able to be in school, so I want that money so that I can educate my child better at home." And I thought, yeah, I totally get what you're saying here, is there needs to be a recognition that a child who's not in school should still be absolutely able to access education, and they should get financial support to be able to educate in whatever environment that looks like, in the way, whether that looks like bringing in tutors, whether that looks like parental input, grandparent input. And I think that is what I'm realizing is it's not a case of going, I know how to fix this. We need to fix this by doing X, because every single one of our stories is different, and what's worked for all of our children is actually quite different. Actually, I was going to come to you, Laura, because I think you talked about training. And I'm presuming that you're meaning more than, a 2-day workshop for CPD benefits on tick, I've now done my autism training. What would you see it looking like? How would you see would be the best change that you could think, actually, this is going to make a difference? I think that's so interesting. And actually, well, I don't know, maybe again, this is a bit controversial, but I think that the whole neurotypical students, I think that just having this regimented testing has so many problems, doesn't it? Because there is so much tick boxing. No, you just need to know this. No, we don't need to know past this. I would be teaching the kids and I'll be like, well, the exam board needs you to say it like this. No, I don't know why that is. And no, I can't explain around about it, but you won't get the mark till you say that. Yeah.
Charlotte, I don't know about Scotland, but in England, you can actually apply for an EOTA. Have you heard of that?
I have heard of this. So this is educated otherwise than at school. Yes, is that correct, Adele?
Yeah. There are, in exceptional circumstances, that parents can apply for these packages so that they can apply for ways and support packages so that they can actually educate and get packages put into place for their children to be educated outside the school environment.
Yeah.
And if you get the right support in place, I know people that have done this, and there are there are some amazing advocates out there that are specialists in this, that can help parents to write the most fantastic schemes for this. If you get it right, you can get really good EOTAs written. If your child is not doing well at school, and if school is not the right place for your child, then the right EOTA can be a really, really good provision for your child.
Yeah, I'd say if we didn't have that put into place, then my daughter wouldn't have gone back to school. But there is still that compromise that has to be taken as a parent who can actually navigate all that for them and support them in that. And certainly for my wife, that element of changing the role from being a parent to a teacher quite often, because she was supporting her online. There was a lot of online stuff. There's an online provider called Wolsey Hall, who we had the local authority fund. It was very good, but it wasn't for everything. And actually, I tried to teach her Spanish. That didn't go down so well. No entiendo. So it's like, it's not happening. But she did a fantastic job with her on maths and science and all those subjects as well. But we got the budget implemented, but it was better because how we did it, and it comes down to, like Adele was saying earlier on, about getting that evidence, and it was showing that need, demonstrating the need, and then tying that in with the outcomes. So taking section E and section F, tying them together, and then presenting that back to the local authority and saying to them, this is what I'm saying. This is going to get the core fundamentals of education. And these are the bits that are going to give the things like swimming, or we had alpacas as well for a therapy. So all these things were detailed down on the education in the school. And then I tied them into what outcome they were going to achieve. And they couldn't argue with that at that point. And actually still on the EHCP now, it says that the personal budget is still listed as being an option. We could actually flex back to it fairly quickly.
Okay, I'm just going to be absolutely brutally honest. I just don't know how much fight I have in me. I think that Molly is most definitely eligible in terms of, I think we could probably, she's very complex because of her cerebral visual impairment. She works at font size 48. So everything I create for her has to be at that size. And we work with the school because sitting exams at font size 48 is incredibly difficult. So there's a lot of complexities around about Molly that meeting need is very tricky. Yeah. We are still in a situation where we're getting by, where we are like, okay, I got today done, tick, and I think that's just where we've been for years.
So there's the difficulty there that if you do go down for those who are down the education or the school route in England, certainly, is then that exam element of, I know you've got that tie-in now you've got for GCSEs. If you've chosen to do that, getting your child to go into a room that they're not aware of, to get invigilated of all those things that happen, that was one of the main kind of driving factors for us to get her back into a school ish environment that could then handle that. I know there's other accommodations that have been made as well.
I'm just saying that there may be people out there that kids, you've got to bear in mind that that saying, you've met one autistic person, so you've met one autistic person.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, there are lots of people out there that have autistic people with certain needs that want to have their kids, and they want to get them, their end goal is to get their kids through high school with qualifications. And there are people out there that want to get their kids through, just get their kids alive basically, and their end goal is, and I know that sounds really dark, and I'm sorry to put it that way, but their kids are so depressed and so stressed by just getting up and through the day, and they cannot cope with even the idea of going into a school building. And I remember our middle son was so stressed, even in 6 weeks of high school, that we used to drive. Part of our therapy in the first part was to the school gates, and that's what we did. We spent a week driving to school gates, and then we did driving to school gates and walking to the gate, and then we did a week of driving to school gate, and then they realized that this was so detrimental to him that it was just not working. But we had to go through weeks worth of just doing these little baby steps to prove that he just couldn't cope in a mainstream school, which was ridiculous, to be honest. But you have to prove how horrifically they can't cope with it. But we were lucky enough to the fact that we knew an end goal of where we thought he could cope, and that we had an older child in a school that we knew would be right for him. And we knew that that was a possibility. But some kids don't want to do that. And there's some kids that want to do something that's more vocational and that doesn't need an exam. And there's so many jobs in this world that don't need exams. And there's so many professions in this world that don't need to have an exam in it. And do you know what? If the world was made up of doctors and lawyers and accountants and all these boring things, it would be a really dull place. And autistic people and neurodiverse people are phenomenal, and they see the world in such an amazing way. And why do we all want to see it in boring ways? And they have so much more to offer us. We don't want to put them in boxes. They're not square pegs to go into round holes. They don't need to necessarily go into the boring, awful establishments that everybody wants them to do. The educational system is broken. Our kids are not designed for the educational system. Whatever we as parents try and do, we are not, in our generation, realistically, going to fix it. It's just not, it's not going to happen. I know we should say on this that we're going to, and this is what we want to do, but we're not going to. And what I think we should try and do is make the best of what we've got and try and make sure that our kids come out of education having achieved their best selves and having made sure that they come out having the best they could possibly get from education and having achieved the best of themselves. That's what I think they should take from it. And I think they need to have come out of education having gone somewhere that they're happy, having gone somewhere that they've made friends, having gone somewhere that they've got life skills, having gone somewhere that they can get a job, even if that's a couple of hours a week. When they go into a room, they can have a conversation with somebody, because that really is more important than everything else in life. I think we want them to be happy. We want them to be healthy. And that, maybe to me, maybe not to everybody else, but to me, I want them to be happy and to be healthy and to be able to be a bit independent. And really, that's what schools should be pushing. And I get the nines and the distinctions and everything else, but the best things my kids have got out of school is to be able to hold a conversation with somebody, to be able to say, hello, how are you? How was your day today? Are you feeling okay? To be able to have friendships. And that to me is the most important thing. It's not okay, yeah, they have done well. Yeah, my two big ones are doing well, and hopefully my youngest will do well at school as well. But it's their friendships. It's their friendships and their ability to have friends and know how to ask after people. My youngest knows that if it's somebody's birthdays, he knows he should have a present and he should buy them a card and he should wish them happy birthday. And he knows he should ask after people. And some of that has come from social skills training from school. I'd like to think some of it's from us, but I know some of it's from school. And that's from kind teachers and nice teachers that have cared from him. None of that's come. Do you know what I mean? That's what education's about.
But they see the world 360 degrees. It's actually not a linear thought process that they've got. And I should probably not say it, but I will, is that I actually employ about 40 people. And I've never ever asked one of them for a copy of their GCSEs. I've always taken them all on face value. And hopefully my employers. And I listened to this. There was just one point I made. I was listening to what Charlotte was saying there, and it was about the rigidity of thought process that the schools have. They're the ones that have got the rigidity of thought process, which is really quite ironic considering that it's supposed to be autistic people who have rigidity of thought process. But actually it's the schools that need to be flexible and need to be more fluid in their approach and more understanding and empathetic to their needs and actually be diverse in their approach to the diversity that all of these children have, because there isn't a one-stop shop, a one-size-fits-all, should I say, for education. Everyone learns differently, everyone engages differently. And I think if schools could be a bit more flexible, or we have different types of schools, then that's where will make a big difference for society, I think, in the long run.
My kids work every day, and I feel like they should be marked as present at school because they're taking part in school every day. I get a tracking report from the school and all it says is absent. And I think, well, they aren't absent. They're taking part in a different way. And so I think that's tiny. It's absolutely nothing. And yet it's pretty huge, because it recognizes that there's different ways to learn. Listen, I'm really, really aware of the time. I think we're going to have another podcast about education at some point because there's so much to say. Very, very quickly to round up and to leave off, what would your number one piece of advice be to a listener who's right now head in their hands? You know, imagine your lowest point where you were like, this is bleak. This is really bleak. And I cannot think how we're going to get out of here and my child is going to thrive. What is your one piece of advice to those parents listening?
I'd say persevere. There is support out there. If you look on the websites, there's plenty out there. There's charities that'll support it, the likes of IPSI, SOS, SEN. You know, those they were real good. Just finding out that, just getting through the law element of it, get rid of all that jargon and look into it, and you'll see that there's some real key criteria and timelines that they need to follow. It's not all as scary as it might seem. And then just use those model template letters to get your kid the support that they deserve. But persevere and reach out to people. We're all here. We're all been through it. And there's plenty of people who love giving unsolicited advice, but at the same time, we've been through it and are happy to help.
I would say evidence, and more evidence. The more evidence you can gather, the better. Make sure you've got as many reports as possible is the sensible thing. And then my non-sensible thing to say is that it doesn't matter what schools say to you, because you as a parent know your child the best. You as parents are the best person to know your child. Trust yourself, trust your instinct, never ever give up fighting. And most importantly, hug your child, hold them tight, and it doesn't matter how many things you give them. If it's cuddles, if it's kisses, if it's bars of chocolate or toys, it doesn't matter. You love them, and just show them that you love them, because you know what? That's the most important thing.
This is what I wanted to say. Never give up. If I wanted to give up, I would do this over 5 years ago. But I was something that didn't work. Let's try something else, and never give up. Be consistent and believe. Believe in yourself, believe in your child, and everything will be fine. This is what I keep doing, and I will never stop. Believe and never give up.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Laura, what about you?
Yeah, sorry, my camera's given up for some reason. Yeah, I don't know why, and I can't get it back. So sorry about
Don't
that.
worry.
I apologise. No, I think absolutely. Just to echo what you've all said, don't give up. A lot of the time, unfortunately, it's not a fair system, but it is whoever shouts the loudest. And you do know your children, and fight for the right education for them, because it will be out there. There will be something, whether it is home, EOTUS, a specialist provision, will be out there. But absolutely, you are the best advocates for your children.
Can I just say, I think I've just been blown away or buoyed up by your fighting spirit. There is a thread of recognition when I listen to you, but also I have to be honest, there's also a thread of exhaustion. There's so many years of fighting or feeling like you are having to go up against a system that doesn't work, that it is exhausting. And it has been really inspiring just to hear how you guys pick yourself up and just carry on going. And I actually have a Team Around the Child meeting tomorrow, so I'm really glad we've had this chat tonight. That's it. I'm buoyed up.
You need to let us know how it goes now.
Yeah, I will do. Well, if you don't hear from me, then it didn't go well.
Charlotte, you have forgotten the really important part, the thing that everybody really needs to keep going with this fight.
What have I forgotten?
Right. An assistance dog.
Sorry, apologies. I was like, have I not realised something? Absolutely, yes, it is true. It is true. All our young ones do have assistance dogs who are amazing and a huge important part of their journey. Craig, Adele, Laura, Anna, thank you so much for joining tonight. It's been so good to chat about it. A little bit heartbreaking too, to be perfectly honest, because I think the one thing we've repeated more than anything else is that the system is broken. If I could say one thing to listeners, it would be this: you're not to blame. This is not your fault. This is not your child's fault. You're doing an amazing job in difficult circumstances. Your child is doing an amazing job in very difficult circumstances. And please know that you are most definitely not alone. I definitely had times where I thought everyone else is doing something I cannot do, but you're not alone. You will find so many people that are going through a similar journey to you. Now, we would absolutely love you to get involved as listeners and share your views. Please head over to our Facebook and Instagram pages, Autism Dogs Charity. There you'll find a question up about this podcast. Tell us your stories, share your journey, and we will look forward to speaking to you next time. Okay, bye.